Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to BEaTS Research Radio, a YouTube and podcast channel dedicated to bringing our community closer to research in the science and engineering fields. I'm Hallie Arnott, a Biomedical Engineering master's student at the University of Ottawa, and I'll be your host on today's episode. Joining us today is Amanda Centazzo-Colella, a Senior Research and Development Engineer with Baylis Medical in their New Product Innovations Group. A native of Montreal, she graduated from McGill University with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and passion for biomedical research and innovation. She then attended Dalhousie University, where she completed a thesis project studying the hemodynamic impact of stent implantation. After her master's degree, Amanda spent time developing next-generation devices for use in bone reconstruction at the trauma division of Stryker in Germany, before moving back to her home here in Canada to begin work at Baylis Medical. In her 4 years with the company, she focused on early stage research, investigating emerging technologies in the electrophysiology space. Thank you so much, Amanda, for joining us here today on BEaTS Research Radio.
Thanks for having me, Hallie.
Could you tell us briefly about Baylis Medical and also your role as a Senior Research and Development Engineer with the company?
Sure. So Baylis is a developer and a manufacturer of medical devices and new technologies in the medical space. And we kind of work in a few different areas, but the main focus is in cardiology. And like you mentioned, I've been working in the company in the electrophysiology kind of space, looking at new devices and new technology.
That's very interesting. So something I was hoping to get out of this interview today was to talk about your transition from that master's degree in mechanical engineering and then transitioning into research and development in the industry. So as I mentioned, you were doing your master's at Dalhousie University looking at the hemodynamic implant of stent implantation. What was your experience like transitioning from that type of research to now looking at electrophysiology and then also changing that setting of being in academia to now going into industry?
So for me, in my experience, the transition was actually pretty smooth. And there's a few reasons for it. The first is that like the skills that I was using in research were very much transferable to what I was doing in industry. We were doing a lot of the same types of research. But then the other reason is because in academia, I think that you're very much expected to be a self-starter and to self-teach. Whereas when I joined industry, from the beginning, you really get targeted trainings. So the transition was easy. I think that there's a lot of hesitancy to move from academia to industry, but it was actually a pretty nice transition. I would kind of compare it to when you join a project in industry, you're getting on a moving train. So the train is going that way and you're going along for the ride. Whereas when I started my research, I was starting up that research for the first time at that university. So I had to get it set up and it was really about building the momentum for the project myself. So kind of different mindsets, but it definitely made going from academia to industry pretty straightforward.
Oh, that's a very good analogy, I think, the train analogy. I think a lot of people in academia know that kind of beginning of a project that's very difficult. So I can see that in industry, sometimes you're hopping on and that part's already been done.
Yeah.
So about that train, I guess, like, would you say that some of the experiences and maybe skills that you developed during your master's were transferable when moving into industry?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I think all researchers will understand when I say that research is just a series of challenges and a series of hurdles and getting this experiment to work and getting this set up and kind of that pushing through and that perseverance even when things feel like they're not working. I think that lives on in you even when you leave the academic sphere. And then, there's also just tangible skills that you'll take with you. Something like scientific literacy, I think that we kind of take it for granted in research and in academia because it's such a normal part of what we do. But then when you leave and you go somewhere else, you'll see that the ability to interpret studies and interpret data and not just understand what it means, but to really understand the implications to what you are doing, that's a skill that's transferable no matter what area of research, development, industry, academia that you're in. And it's not really something you can teach. It's something you have to hone over years and years of working in a space and applying those principles.
Right. So if you were to maybe give a list of 3 skills that you thought were the most helpful, looking, and maybe you didn't think that they would be helpful when you were doing your master's, but now you're looking back like, oh, those things actually did help me and I didn't realize at the time. Is there anything that kind of pops into mind? Maybe along with the things that you've already mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, there are tangible, like there are technical things that I learned in my master's that were transferable. So things like design of experiments, things like building experimental setups, all those things. Even when you take it from, I was working in something more geared towards hemodynamics, and then I moved to electrophysiology. All of that stuff was very much equivalent. Like I knew what I was doing when I got there in that respect. So that's the big one that I can think of.
So something that I find with the difference between academia and industry is that translating technologies from your discoveries and from research to market is something that seems to be very different because especially in the biomedical science and engineering fields, these technologies can have like dramatic impacts on people's lives. So where do you see the biggest differences between translating technologies and discoveries from your kind of research in industry versus how it happens in academia?
So I guess it's definitely possible to market a device that you've developed in academia. And I know people who have been successful in doing that. But I definitely think that you're kind of swimming against the current when you're doing that, because academia is geared towards sharing information and creating new knowledge and kind of like, I always think of it as like unlocking the secrets that nature holds and kind of putting it out into the world for everybody. But in industry, marketing the device, that is the reason for being. So it's just a lot simpler because that infrastructure and those resources, they already exist built into the company. And I think in my experience, I found academia could sometimes be a little bit isolating, whereas industry is very much a team sport. So you're always working with a lot of people. When you're trying to market a device as an academic, there's definitely support for you and there's resources, but you're kind of a one-man show, right? So you're the designer and you're the inventor and you are trying to figure out how to make it and who's going to make it and find suppliers and how are you going to sell it, and you're trying to build relationship with physicians to get it out. But in industry, there's a person to do each one of those functions, or there's a department to do each one of those functions. And so as the engineer, you get to really focus on the technology. And so in a sense, it's totally different mindset, and it definitely makes it a lot easier to see it get through to that final stage.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's kind of like a startup in a sense, but from the very, very start of the technology.
Yeah, and actually, like I think that there are a lot of successful partnerships between academia and industry to bring things to market, and then you kind of get both sides working together to push it forward.
Mm-hmm. You're right. And in, I guess from the industry standpoint, how does that marketing and beginning from where you would be working in the new product innovations group, what does that, I guess, road look like for a device? Can you share that information with us, or?
So one of the things that I love the most about my job and working at Baylis is that it's structured in a way where even though I'm the engineer, I get to see it from conception through to going to a patient. We really follow the project, its whole life cycle, but in partnership with the different departments and experts that will come along for the ride at different stages in it. So usually it'll start with an idea, and you start by working on just the proof of concept. So we call that definition phase, and you're just trying to prove out that your idea is going to work. On the project that I spent most of my time on, I was really lucky that it was a completely new technology and we didn't really understand the underlying condition, the patient condition, very well. It wasn't understood in the field. And so in that time, I got to spend so much time doing research, like pure scientific research, to really understand at a pathology level, like what is actually the etiology of this disease, so that we were sure we were making the right solution to address it. So at the front end of it, we got to spend a lot of time doing clinical research, and that was really amazing. So then when it comes time to actually design the device, you have such a deep understanding of what you're trying to solve. And then the next thing you would go into is prototyping. So you start prototyping devices and proving them out, and then you kind of follow the design along through detailed design, through to verification, and then finally into and clinical trials or some other kind of trials to get it to the patient.
That's amazing. Just listening to how that process happens is great. And have you been able to see a device be implanted or used with a patient, or see that patient satisfaction of the device that your group had created?
So a lot of the devices that I have been involved with are ongoing. So different stages of development, but the thing that gives me a lot of satisfaction, and I think sometimes this is the part that you don't get to see in academia, even though you are having an impact, but is every time that I get to meet with a physician and she says to me, you know, I have a patient that this would absolutely benefit, or I have a case coming up and like this would be awesome. It just makes it so easy for me to go to work. It makes me like really, really love what I'm doing.
And just hearing about the people it could benefit is also really great. So something I wanted to ask about, I guess that process you were talking about in terms of that research you do at the beginning and then through to device development, prototyping. Is there any stage in that process in which publications would be made on some sort of device that you're creating, or any sort of research that you're doing? Because in academia, a lot of the end goal of a project is to publish in a paper and get those results out there. And is that still a goal when in industry?
It'll really depend on the project that you're working on. So like I mentioned, the project that I spent most of my time on, the underlying cause wasn't well understood. And so there was a really strong drive for us to publish, where we wanted the whole clinical space to understand what the problem was, because then it would make understanding our solution simpler if everyone understood why this problem was occurring. So on that project, we absolutely were interested in publishing, and we would work together with universities and physician partners to get publications going, to get that information out so everybody understood the problem in the same way. I don't know if that's universal in industry. It definitely does depend on what you're working on. One of the things that I definitely miss about academia is that strong drive to share information immediately. And, you know, that's why in academia you have conferences and you have department meetings and everyone is always sharing their research. And that's definitely something that I miss. And that's where industry differs a little bit, in that you have to be a bit more deliberate about what you share. There could be intellectual property concerns, so you're more careful about what you're talking about publicly. So it's not the same. The drive to publish is not the same.
I see where that can. There are a couple of roadblocks there that are a bit preventative. Yeah, but there is that aspect though that academia sometimes doesn't have or wouldn't have as much of, is that I guess getting out those patents or kind of I guess the 510K, all that kind of stuff. So is that something that is more of a goal in industry with research and development, is getting those types of publications, I guess?
Yeah, so I guess we do have those types of publications, and we think about publication a little bit differently. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if like patents are our goal, but we're definitely always looking to come up with ideas and then protect them.
Definitely. So if As a final question for the interview, if you could give a piece of advice to a graduate student, maybe a master's student, such as myself, who's looking to make that transition from academia to industry and possibly still in that research and development realm, what would it be?
So looking to get into industry, I would say one thing I wish I had thought of more when I was looking was to focus more on finding a role that's a really good fit for me. So I think that I felt like, oh, I'm new to industry. I only have academic background. Like maybe people aren't going to hire me, but it's not the case at all. Like a lot of the skills you have are transferable. And so I would say when you go to interviews and when you're looking at roles, think of it as a two-way conversation. Don't think of it as them vetting you. Think of it as also you vetting the role and understanding what kind of research they're doing and if it's in line with what you like to do. That's number one. And then number two would be when you get to a new company, I think one of the things that was really beneficial for me was building relationships outside of my immediate team and even outside of engineering. So I think as engineers and scientists, sometimes we're a little bit prone to hanging out with people who think like us and who are also engineers and scientists. But if you can talk to people who are in other departments, so I'm thinking like people who are in marketing, people who are in process engineering, people who are in IP or are in regulatory, those types of relationships, they really help me understand these nuances of medical devices that sometimes we maybe are a little bit shielded from in academia, or it's kind of like a blind spot for us. We don't get a lot of exposure to them. And understanding all those different functions and how they fit together and knowing those people who were experts in those functions, it really helped me understand how a device gets to market, how it gets made. And I think it helped me be better at my job. So I think that the last time we spoke, I kind of said the same thing, like relationship building is one of the most important things that you can do for your own development, but then also for your being good at your job. And I think it applies here as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are great pieces of advice. I'll definitely put them in my back pocket, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers here who are in their grad studies and looking towards going to industry will also find them very helpful. So that concludes our interview for today. Thank you so much, Amanda, for taking the time to speak with us here on BEaTS Research Radio about your career in research and development in the biomedical industry.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
BEaTS Research Radio is supported by the University of Ottawa Heart Institute, the BEaTS Research Lab, and the Department of Biochemistry, Microbiology, and Immunology at the University of Ottawa. Our director is Dr. Emilio Alarcon. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you all next time.